Zapatutate. Oh, oh, my bad. Welcome. Thank you for stopping by. Listen, we're gonna talk a little bit about the Risk Agile Framework, and we're gonna try to stay to the point, and I'm gonna try not to get myself in too much trouble. It's early. We have a lot of publications we're working on, and some we've begun to put out there, and there's a lot of forms left to fill out and T's to cross. And by no means have we arrived at a place to say, version one. But gosh darn it, if we aren't at, zero point 0.3 and ready to start sharing some things, then we got to do it anyway. So let's talk a little bit about the Risk Agile Framework. After over 18 active years involved in Agile, Lean, Scrum, project work, enterprise software development, small teams, medium teams, large teams, the last 10 years working a lot with full company transformations. At some point you've probably seen or you'll hear me talk a little bit about the sideways organizational chart. The sideways org chart is inside of this Risk Agile framework. And so having that opportunity to help small and medium and several Fortune 5 and 10 companies really take and run very successful pilots, and in the case of small and medium companies, often run a complete overhaul to work over a period of weeks, if not short months, to help a company really unrecognize itself from where it once was, and no longer be burdened by and suffer what for many has become a 5 and 10 and 15 year agile journey. Has been a tremendous expense of time and vocabulary spaghetti. But the outcome, the result, we keep showing up and we're doing what we think are the steps, and the results continue to vary, and the results continue to be difficult, and the final chapter of each of the stories that is offered to us still talks about something so abstract and large and grandiose. And even the Scrum guide itself and the Scrum framework, the most dominant and popular, absolutely by far reigning champion of this agile movement, has grown very stale. See, if we look at where these things originated, these are all emergent patterns and theories. These are all things, each of them, as myself would talk about, as being observed. There was a point and a time and a situation, and I was in that moment, and I observed a very different framework for approaching the solutioning, and and I managed to capture enough of that to write it down when I got home, and thus was born something. And for years and years and years, that something was tended to. Now, what has gotten away from us, and why I look to my favorite people in the world and my favorite frameworks in the world, and the things that when used right over and over and over again create the same magnificent results in the world. A, there are several, each able to create that result, meaning there's more than one path. And B, each share an origin story that has grown stale. Now, they are the next generation. The generations before them, these kinds of works and origin stories might last 70 years or 100 years or 40 years and remain relevant. Unfortunately, or wonderfully, you and I don't occupy that world anymore. We instead occupy a world where these original concepts in 2001 and the things we were all pondering, the models we were putting in place were basic object-oriented principles. Now, you don't have to be a software engineer to benefit any of this, to participate in any of this, and I'll avoid some of it so that you can fully even participate in this talk, but ultimately, we observed in the nature of the software we were building that if we could create an abstract understanding for the robots of our world, if we could model that, if we could use object-oriented technique and design pattern, then we could write smarter and smarter software that required less and less code, that was easier and easier to organize and test, more predictable, and wonderfully we began this journey of maximize the amount of software not written. which later became maximize the amount of work not done, maximize the amount of steps not taken. Like, these are wonderful things once you get past startup fever that you begin to mature into, or fail and have a lot of pain. So in this journey, as we looked at object-oriented patterns in 2001, a lot of these were proven in certain languages and certainly doable in many languages, but they were very, very hard and expensive and required a high degree of maturity across your staff to even work with. It was difficult. But when you look up several years later, and this pattern really picks up pace, but what happens for us is a few years later, these patterns become built into our frameworks. They're built into our libraries. They're built into our development environments. They're built and you get them for free. So if in the past these frameworks were based on emergent theories coming out of software development, well, object-oriented technologies, these breakthroughs that caused such a revolution across the business landscape, are no longer new or interesting. Long time ago they became free, widely available, forgettable. Not entirely true, but within your work you're going to find a very similar path. You're going to find the same thing has happened to your craft. The same thing has happened to your delivery of goods and services, to your market, to how it and what it takes to delight your customers. And so the advancement, if we continue to look at what the forefront of pioneering in technology and what they're concerned with, we watch it change, and we watch it change, and we watch it change, and we don't see these methodologies changing. We don't see them keeping pace. They're still mostly talking about object-oriented design patterns. So we take a look at, we see the next was really functional design, and bringing in and maturing functional design patterns and making those common and easy. And after functional design, aspect-oriented programming principles. And beyond aspect, we move into reactive. Our database technologies are changing the same time, from relational and RDBMS and warehousing to key value pair and flat storage and NoSQL and non-relational store mechanisms, all the way out to event data stores that are all meant to solve such very different, unique problems in the world that have presented themselves in the new world. And at the same time, our capabilities, as we leave the spinning platter hard drive and move to digital storage mediums, and even now this idea of the NVEM data read write, the world has changed so much, and our approaches to solving these problems have changed so much, and these frameworks have changed so little. So when you catch up, when you get to where we are, and we're in the middle of and gonna change again in the next few years, right? And I can tell you where we're headed, but right now it should look like the kind of org chart we're creating in the Sideways org chart. That is how you architect your organization and how you define and lay out and play a good clean game at the right gear, depending on your scale, a few other factors. If you lay out and play it to the Risk Agile framework out in that gear, then you're going to look almost identical to what a cloud native microservice architecture looks. Just like you're where you hurt now or where you hurt in the past, and where companies struggle in the past, they've created the monolith. They have a monolith. This is a word you've probably heard. Monolith architectures in software and spaghetti code and touch one thing and break other things. It's so difficult. And so by helping break apart the monolith, Scrum and Lean and Agile and XP and Kanban and some of those not as much as others, but a lot of these were helping us in different ways to mature and help the business grow to mimic and honor what we were discovering and learning coming out of the best of software development at scale. So that's what time it is. That's what the Risk Agile Framework's all about. You just play the game, don't have to do a bunch of training, we don't have to go learn a lot of stuff, we just show up, we can begin playing. And as we play over a couple of weeks, we're going to understand and learn and be able to operate from a place of knowing having developed a better appetite and developed a better sense of the questions that we might care about as we begin our journey in more proper, as we begin our journey forevermore as a company, how we treat and talk to and communicate with and collaborate internally to help delight our customers and grow our book of business externally. And all of a sudden, over a 3 and then a 6 year period in the very beginning, and now what happens often, very much quicker, a 1 to 3 year period, but in the very beginning, that 3 to 6 year period, we go from sort of theoretical and abstract and notional, and we have some push pin ideas to doable and affordable, and the risk of doing so has been mitigated. It's been made more accessible to more common development sort of groups. And then finally, free and forgettable. And a lot of people work today with really powerful inversion of control and dependency injection as a silly, for instance, and I'll knock it off. That used to be really hard to pull off, before that theoretically wonderful, and today you get for free. A lot of people probably don't even understand much about it at all. They just know it's magic and it works. So that brings us to the Risk Agile Framework. And the Risk Agile Framework is exactly how it sounds. That from the beginning, we've said, 2 things. Number one, as it gets faster and faster, it's become much less useful in our demands of creativity and innovation, blah, 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 but it's become far less useful to sit around and think about and pontificate and hypothesize, that it's better to just, take half an afternoon, note those fears, note those excitements, note the actual outcome goals that matter, note who is going to say, please, thank you, yes, please, may I have another. Again, none of this is software related. And then get going, right? Shoot that BB gun one time and then scoot it a little left and shoot it again and shoot it again. And chances are you'll find you can hit a lot of those targets much faster than you would have originally written contracts. And now you know stuff. And now you begin your journey of operating from a deeper and deeper knowing of stuff, so that your questions get better, and your ideas get better, and your predictions get better, and your skills get better. So the Risk Agile Framework says, don't play or make it safe for certain layers in the organization, right? Don't choose a methodology that makes it safe for a certain population, because even if that thing, which nature will not honor and is not natural, even if that can be pulled off, it will have to then be at the cost of others. Don't look to more memorization of words and the fact that, certain other organizations have made it so easy to sort of parallel in 16 pages with life, and maybe makes it overly simple. If you are deeply educated in both rugby and football and agile and Scrum, the whole joke makes sense, and it's actually very useful. But I've only a couple times bravened teaching corporations how to play rugby, air quotes, corporately, but it's very successful. It works in the right atmosphere. And I almost always show up to agile events wearing rugby gear, so there's that. I love Scrum, love my time with Jeff Sutherland. I'm a huge fan of Joe Justice, and we talk kind of regularly. Love that guy. So, hats off. This is the legacy we inherit. These are our forefathers. These are what came before us, but what comes now is the combining of that. Yeah, we get it. You got to go get busy early and take eyes wide open, awake, aware, and intentional. They flinched. You're going to see them all change their minds now, but they all flinched in remote and distribution, and they, the 2-day workshop and the $1,600 a person and the piece of paper, and it was, I don't know, it kind of worked. It kind of worked. It was kind of useful. It got us where we are, so it was super useful, but it's time to put it to bed. The Risk Agile Framework outlines such a clear and concise set of rules and gameplay, roles to play. You simply choose your character, work up your character sheet, begin on Monday, And as teams of 5 to 7 to 9 within communities of some abstract of that times 5, so you're 25 to 40, inside of organizational constructs that can grow into the thousands and tens of thousands. On one side, the Risk Agile Framework is used by companies and corporations to replace their operations. Now HR knows where to live, and all the component teams that support teams and that support the business. They know where to live and who to live with and how to operate. All the feature delivery teams know how to execute on their markets. They know how to cooperate with other teams. They know how to do open world, big room planning, big room retrospective, big room celebrations. Now, to the other side of the Risk Agile Framework, with or without the organizational operations, you have this idea of building the ponds, the idea of creating the places and spaces, situations and conditions in which it is highly likely, almost by accident and free, because there's a hunger and longing for it, that crafters within your organization, that managers or the leaders and the execs over here and the developers over here or the floor clerks over here and that each to their craft would find a place where others just like themselves within the same company or the largest organizational division you come up with, right? As these communities grow, we find that we begin to span well beyond lines of business and well beyond portfolios to encompass larger and larger slices and eventually the entire organization. If you are accidentally paying 3,500 different people to develop Java and they don't know how and have no way and are not supported by you, you've not built the pond where they can come together and collaborate and find each other and pressure each other in a craftsmanship way, encourage each other in a craftsmanship way, inspire, then what are you doing? You're just running around with your arms crossed, being all upset because remote and distribution doesn't somehow make sense to you in a way that's tangible or useful or whatever. But that's no longer the ask. It hasn't been for a long time. Many generations of your workforce have been trained and training for this for a very long time. We're already good at this, and those that wish to organize digitally and shake away the borders of geography are going to find themselves around the right kind of team inside of the right kind of community and are going to drive you forward in a way. If you haven't seen it, it's delicious. All right. So practically, the Risk Agile Framework just says, let's start on Monday. Here it is. Play the game. Do it as a business operations or launch your communities of practice. And or both, maybe pick one and then the other and then both. Do it in a guided way a couple times, just like if you were learning to play a complicated game. You wanted to play a really successful game of Dungeons and Dragons with 100 of you. Well, I highly suggest, the first time, let someone that's done it before host you, and let those inspired champions nearest to you and in your community that you already staff and pay, let them take a lot of notes and let them co-host, let them shoulder up, let them prepare to begin serving you in this way forevermore, and you'll develop this as an internal skill, internal capability. All right, so we know there's some things that if you were to embrace the whole Risk Agile framework and you kind of turn on all of the game parts, sure, we got to move from project to product. Sure, we've got to organize onto and into a micro team organizational architecture, and it's remote. And even though this particular program only requires a tiny remote commitment from everyone in the organization, often fitting into continuous improvement budgets or continuous edge budgets or budgets that employees already have allocated for them. But it helps us become experts. It helps us to really look at and lean into and participate in and become part of something that becomes very forgettable. It's a very small attendance each day. And then it's executed in our real lives, right? It's played in the background. It's tended to. It pulls us to particular behaviors and particular patterns at particular times to do particular outcomes. but it is executed in real life and through your daily lives. Now, fully remote teams that are executing this to replace their business operational model, now they'll probably leave some of these tools up 6 hours a day. But for the rest of us, it's a 15-hour a day, 1 to 1.5 hour a week commitment. High five. All right, so we do it. We talk about it as a community, crash a little bit, we do it some more, and then we learn about it. It's an incredibly different way to do it. The investment is similar to the individual taking a 2-day class and getting that little CMS or something, CSM, whatever that is, and these kinds of things, but it's spread out over 6 weeks. And the ultimate cost of time and material and impact and such is very similar, but in a sense we can bring the entire conference to the people. And whether there's 400 of you spread out over 3 continents, or 80 of you or 60 of you working, all in the States, but perhaps during this time you're remote, or you've always had a couple people remote. You want to explore what a really successful remote culture and remote workforce, remote operations, communities of service, guilding, chapters, these kinds of things. This is the way to do it. So looking forward to seeing you in some of the classes, on some of the calls, looking forward to being invited to speak with you in your organizations. You mash the idea of the Risk Agile Framework into the Remote Agile Dojo 6-week program, and you have a really wonderful way to get started, introduced affordably to all of these concepts, and you'll never be the same. Until next time, I'll be cheering for you. Cheers. Bye-bye.